David gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white as he pulled into the long, winding driveway of his childhood home. The estate was magnificent, a sprawling brick mansion surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns. To outsiders, it was a symbol of ultimate success. To David, it was a fortress built on judgment, cold remarks, and impossible standards. At 35, he still felt that familiar, heavy tightening in his chest every time he visited his parents, Arthur and Eleanor. In the passenger seat sat his 7-year-old son, Toby. Toby was holding a simple white envelope with both hands, his face glowing with excitement. For the past week, Toby had been working diligently on an anniversary card for his grandparents. He had drawn a picture of the whole family standing together under a bright yellow sun, painstakingly writing "Happy 40th Anniversary" in uneven, colorful block letters. He had even insisted on sealing it with a gold sticker. David looked at his son's innocent smile, a wave of protectiveness washing over him. He prayed silently that tonight would be different. As they stepped inside, the house smelled exactly as it always did: expensive French perfume, polished mahogany wood, and a sterile, cold underlying scent. The grand dining room was filled with laughter and the clinking of crystal glasses. Arthur's wealthy business associates, high society neighbors, and extended family members were gathered around a massive mahogany table, decorated with silver centerpieces and white roses. It was a crowd assembled not out of love, but for display. Eleanor stood at the center of the room, draped in an elegant emerald dress and wearing a diamond necklace that caught the light brilliantly. Arthur stood beside her, holding a glass of aged scotch, laughing loudly with a colleague. When Eleanor spotted David and Toby entering, her smile instantly vanished, replaced by an analytical, frosty gaze. She didn't approach them to say welcome. She merely looked them up and down, measuring their worth in seconds. Toby, oblivious to the heavy tension in the air, walked straight up to his grandmother. His small shoes clicked quietly against the polished marble floor. "Happy anniversary, Grandma," Toby said proudly, extending his arms to hand her the white envelope. "I made a special card for you and Grandpa all by myself." Eleanor looked down at the envelope as if it were a piece of trash. She didn't take it. Instead, she let out a sharp, mocking sigh that silenced the nearby conversations. "An envelope, David? Really?" she said, her voice dripping with venom, making sure her elite friends could hear every word. "Your brother flew in from London and gifted us an antique grandfather clock. Your sister bought us a luxury cruise to Italy. And you bring us a piece of paper? This is an absolute embarrassment. We don't want your cheap trash here. Take it and get out." Arthur glanced over, nodded coldly, and turned back to his drink without saying a single word to his grandson. The room fell dead silent. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, but nobody spoke up. Toby's outstretched hands began to tremble, his bright smile completely shattered, his eyes filling with tears as he looked down at the floor, confused about what he had done wrong. David felt something shift inside his soul. The years of trying to please his parents, the years of tolerating their emotional abuse. It all evaporated in a single second. The moment they targeted his innocent child, the old David died. David walked forward slowly, his boots thudding softly on the marble. He calmly took the envelope from Toby's trembling hands and pulled his son close to his side. David didn't yell. He didn't scream or break a glass. Instead, a serene, terrifyingly calm smile appeared on his face. It was the expression of a man who had finally been set free from a lifelong prison. "You're right, Mother," David said, his voice incredibly steady, cutting through the absolute silence of the room. "My gifts could never compete with the expensive things you value so much. Since you don't want it, I'll just leave it right here." With absolute grace, David stepped forward and placed the white envelope right at the center of the main dining table, resting it against a silver wine bucket. He then bent down, picked Toby up into his arms, and turned his back on his family without waiting for a response. As they walked toward the grand exit, Eleanor let out a loud, dramatic scoff, muttering to her friends, "Good riddance. He always was the black sheep of this family." David heard it, but for the first time in his life, the words didn't hurt. They felt completely meaningless. Outside, a gentle rain had started to fall, washing away the suffocating atmosphere of the mansion. David buckled Toby into his car seat. Toby was quiet, wiping away his final tears. "Did Grandma hate my drawing?" Toby asked softly, his voice cracking. David climbed into the driver's seat, turned around, and looked his son in the eyes with absolute love. "No, buddy. Your drawing was beautiful. Some people are just blind to beautiful things. It's not your fault, and it's not about you. I love your card more than anything." They drove away from the elite neighborhood, leaving the glittering lights of the mansion behind. David felt an incredible, weightless freedom. They stopped at a small, brightly lit diner on the side of the highway. It was a humble place with vinyl booths and the comforting smell of fresh coffee and pancakes. They sat across from each other, eating warm food and laughing as Toby built a small tower out of syrup containers. There were no judgments here, just a father, a son, and true peace. Back at the mansion, the grand anniversary party was winding down. The guests were slowly leaving, and Eleanor was basking in the compliments of her high society friends. As the servants began clearing the massive mahogany table, Arthur's eyes caught the white envelope David had left behind. Out of pure curiosity and a desire to mock his son's cheap gesture one last time, Arthur picked it up and ripped it open in front of Eleanor and a few remaining close relatives. Inside, as expected, was Toby's colorful, innocent crayon drawing of the family. Eleanor rolled her eyes in disgust, but as Arthur pulled the card out completely, a formal legal document slid out from behind the drawing and fell onto the table. It bore the official stamp of a prestigious Supreme Court law firm and the state tax authority. Arthur's eyes scanned the first few lines and his face instantly turned completely pale, his hands starting to shake violently. Back at the mansion, the grand anniversary party was winding down. The guests were slowly leaving, and Eleanor was basking in the compliments of her high society friends. As the servants began clearing the massive mahogany table, Arthur's eyes caught the white envelope David had left behind. Out of pure curiosity and a desire to mock his son's cheap gesture one last time, Arthur picked it up and ripped it open in front of Eleanor and a few remaining close relatives. Inside, as expected, was Toby's colorful, innocent crayon drawing of the family. Eleanor rolled her eyes in disgust, but as Arthur pulled the card out completely, a formal legal document slid out from behind the drawing and fell onto the table. It bore the official stamp of a prestigious Supreme Court law firm and the state tax authority. Arthur's eyes scanned the first few lines and his face instantly turned completely pale, his hands starting to shake violently. "Arthur, what is it? What did that disappointment leave behind?" Eleanor asked, her voice sharp with annoyance. Arthur couldn't speak. He sank heavily into his dining chair, staring blankly at the paper. For the past 2 years, David had been working as the head financial manager and legal consultant for Arthur's sprawling real estate empire. Arthur and Eleanor had always assumed David held a low-level position, constantly belittling his professional career. What they didn't know was that David had recently discovered a massive, catastrophic legal loophole and an accidental tax fraud error made by Arthur's previous high-priced lawyers. If left unaddressed, the error would trigger an immediate state audit, resulting in multi-million-dollar penalties and the complete foreclosure of their beloved estate mansion. For the past 6 months, David had quietly worked day and night, utilizing all his professional legal connections to fix the massive crisis completely in secret, planning to present the finalized, clean restructuring deed as an ultimate anniversary gift of protection. Eleanor snatched the document from Arthur's shaking hands and read the bold text typed across the top. The document was a formal legal notice of withdrawal of representation and case closure. Behind it was the fully detailed audit report of the multi-million-dollar liability. At the bottom of the document, there was a handwritten note from David, written in neat, elegant black ink. The note read, "Dear Mother and Father, this envelope contained the finalized legal restructuring that would have saved your estate from the upcoming state audit next month. Because I am your son, I fixed your massive mistakes in secret. But tonight, I realized that my family's dignity and my son's happiness are worth far more than your mansion. Since you rejected my cheap gift, I have officially withdrawn my legal protection and closed the case file. You have 30 days before the state audit begins. Good luck with your expensive lawyers. David." A heavy, suffocating panic filled the grand room. Eleanor dropped the paper, her breath caught in her throat. The diamond necklace around her neck suddenly felt like an anchor dragging her down. Arthur frantically pulled out his phone, his fingers slipping as he dialed his high society corporate lawyers. When the head attorney finally answered, Arthur demanded immediate help to fix the tax audit loophole. The attorney's response was cold and final. "Arthur, that specific case structure is incredibly complex. The only person in the entire state who knows how to navigate that specific loophole is your son, David. Without his specific filing, no judge will grant an extension. You are facing total bankruptcy. Eleanor felt the room spinning. The very son she had publicly humiliated, the son she had driven out of her home just an hour ago, was the only shield standing between them and absolute social ruin. Their wealth, their grand status, their pride, it was all about to vanish, crushed by the weight of their own cruelty. Inside the warm, quiet diner, David's phone began to buzz on the table. The screen lit up with the word, "Mother." A few seconds later, it stopped, only to immediately buzz again with the word, "Father." They were calling frantically, over and over again. Toby looked up from his dessert, pointing at the glowing screen. "Dad, Grandma, and Grandpa are calling you. Aren't you going to answer?" David looked at the phone calmly. He reached out his hand, flipped the phone face down onto the table, and silenced the ringtone completely. He looked at Toby and smiled warmly. "No, buddy. Tonight is just for us. Let's get some more ice cream." The constant buzzing of the phone became nothing more than a faint, meaningless vibration against the table, completely powerless against the happiness in David's heart.